Story 1. The Empty Mansion. If I stop typing, my hand starts shaking so bad I can't hold the phone. I'm hiding in a closet right now, seriously considering making a run for it. But I need to get this out first because I honestly don't know if I'm making it out of this house tonight. If you ever see an ad for a house-sitting job that pays way too much money for zero effort, run the other way. My name is Tyler, I'm 22, and like most college students, I'm drowning in debt. That's why when I saw a posting on a local community board asking for a weekend house sitter at $500 a night, I didn't ask questions. The contact guy, a nervous little man named Mr. Henderson, met me at a diner in town. He gave me the keys and cash up front. He said the owners were eccentric and just wanted someone on the property to deter vandals while they were overseas. The mansion was about 20 miles out of town, down a gravel road barely wide enough for my Honda Civic. It was massive, old stone covered in ivy, sitting in the middle of dense woods. It looked like something out of a bad horror movie, but $500 a night buys a lot of bravery. When I pulled up, the vibe was immediately off. It was dead silent out there. No birds, no bugs, just a heavy, oppressive quiet. Inside, the place was freezing. Furniture was draped in white sheets like ghostly statues. Henderson had given me one weird rule. I could sleep anywhere on the ground floor, but the upstairs and the basement were strictly off limits. He said the alarm system was faulty in those zones. The first night was fine, mostly. Just old house noises, creaks and pops that made me jump, but I rationalized it away. I set up camp in the main living room with my laptop, trying to distract myself with Netflix. Around 2 a.m., I heard a distinct thud directly above me. It sounded heavy, like a suitcase being dropped. I paused the movie. Silence. I convinced myself it was a raccoon on the roof and eventually fell asleep. Yesterday morning, things got weird. I woke up and found the kitchen cabinets open. All of them. I knew for a fact I hadn't touched them. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I decided to check the perimeter just to make sure nobody had broken in. Around back, I found a cellar door leading to the basement. It had a massive, rusted padlock on it. But here's the thing. The ground in front of the door was muddy from the recent rain, and there were fresh footprints leading out of the cellar, but none leading in. They were bare feet, and they were huge. I almost bylaid right then. I went back inside to grab my keys and phone. My phone was on the coffee table where I'd left it, but it was dead. I plugged it in, but it wouldn't charge. Then I checked my pocket for my car keys. Gone. Panic started to set in. Real, suffocating panic. I tore the living room apart looking for the keys. I knew I had them. That's when I noticed the basement door inside the house. The one Henderson specifically told me not to open was slightly ajar. A foul smell drifted out of the darkness. It smelled like copper and wet earth. Against every instinct I had, I pushed the door open wider. The stairs went down into total blackness. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking. "Is someone down there?" A low, guttural sound echoed up the stairs. It sounded like a wet cough that turned into a growl. Then heavy, slapping footsteps started coming up the stairs, fast. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. Almost instantly, something massive slammed against the other side. The wood splintered. I didn't wait. I ran to the front door, yanking the handle. Locked. I fumbled with the deadbolt, but it wouldn't budge, like it was welded shut from the outside. The banging on the basement door stopped. For a second, the silence was worse. Then I heard it, the creaking of floorboards overhead. It was upstairs now. I ran into the library and locked the door, sliding down against the wall, trying to catch my breath. I realized then that Henderson hadn't hired me to guard the house. He hired me to feed whatever was inside it. That was 20 minutes ago. I managed to get enough charge on my phone to type this out, but there's no signal to call anyone. I can hear it out in the hall now. It's dragging something heavy along the floor, pausing at every door, rattling the handles. It just stopped outside the library. The doorknob is slowly starting to turn. Story 2, the old lady's window. I still take the long way home from work, even though it adds 20 minutes to my commute. I don't care about the extra gas money or the time lost. It's worth it just to avoid driving past the house on Elm Street where Mrs. Higgins used to live. If you'd seen what I saw in her front window, you'd probably move out of the state entirely. My name is Mark, and up until last month my life was pretty standard. I worked second shift at a warehouse about 30 minutes out of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The drive home at 1:00 a.m. was usually the most relaxing part of my day. Just me, the radio, and empty suburban streets. Part of my routine involved driving past an old, run-down Victorian house on Elm Street. It belonged to Mrs. Higgins. Every kid in the neighborhood knew her. She was that reclusive old lady who yelled at you if your baseball went into her yard. As an adult, I just felt bad for her. She was always alone. Every single night on my way home, without fail, she was sitting in her front bay window. Just a silhouette in a rocking chair, illuminated by a dim lamp, watching the empty street. It was creepy, yeah, but it was routine. It was normal. Until last Tuesday. I was driving past, exhausted, my eyes burning from the warehouse lights. I glanced over at the window out of habit. Mrs. Higgins was there, but she wasn't sitting. She was standing right up against the glass. Her hands were pressed flat against the window pane, and her face was contorted in a way I didn't think was possible for a human being. It was pure, unfiltered terror. Her mouth was open in a silent scream, and her eyes were so wide I could see the whites all around her pupils from 50 feet away. I almost slammed on my brakes, but fear took over and I sped up instead. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I told myself she was just having a medical episode, maybe dementia. I should have called the cops, I know, but I was terrified. The next night, Wednesday, I almost took an alternate route, but curiosity got the better of me. I had to know. As I turned onto Elm, my stomach dropped. The lamp in her window was off. The house was completely dark. That was worse. The empty blackness of that window felt heavy. It felt like something was staring out from deep inside the room, something that didn't need light to see. I drove past slowly. I swear I heard a faint, rhythmic tap-tap-tap on the glass as I went by, but I refused to look. By Thursday, the anxiety was eating me alive. I hadn't slept more than a few hours. I needed answers. Before my shift, I stopped at the gas station down the street from my neighborhood. The attendant, a local guy named Gary who knew everyone's business, was leaning on the counter. "Hey man," I said, trying to sound casual while buying an energy drink. "You hear anything about old Mrs. Higgins on Elm? Her lights have been off." Gary stopped chewing his gum. His face went pale. "Mark, you serious? You didn't hear?" My stomach bottomed out. "Hear what?" "They found her Monday morning," Gary said quietly. "Massive heart attack. She'd been dead in her kitchen for 2 days before the mailman noticed the smell." I dropped the energy drink. It burst on the floor, soaking my shoes, but I couldn't move. Monday morning. If she died Monday morning, then who was standing in the window Tuesday night screaming silently at me? Who was tapping on the glass on Wednesday? I called into work sick. I couldn't handle the warehouse. I went back home and locked every door. I sat on my couch with the lights on, just staring at the wall, trying to process what Gary said. Around 2:00 a.m., unable to sleep, I found myself drawn to my own front window. I live about 4 streets over from Elm. It's a straight shot visually between the back of my house and the side of hers, across a small drainage ditch. I looked out into the dark backyard. It was silent, but then my eyes adjusted and I looked past the fence, toward the vague shape of Mrs. Higgins' roofline in the distance. There was a light on in her second-story window. It wasn't a lamp. It looked like a candle flickering weakly. And right in the center of the window frame, I saw it. It looked like Mrs. Higgins. It had her gray hair, her hunched shoulders, but the proportions proportions were all wrong. The arms were too long, hanging down past its knees, and it wasn't looking out at the street anymore. It was looking directly across the neighborhood, right at my house. The thing raised one of those long, impossible arms and slowly waved. I don't know what's living in Mrs. Higgins' house now that she's gone. The police did a welfare check after neighbors complained about noises, but they found nothing. The house is empty. But I know what I saw, and I know that every night when I look in the mirror to brush my teeth, I see that same terrified expression on my own face that I saw in her window that first night. I think she wasn't screaming at me to go away. I think she was begging for help from whatever was behind her. Story 3, the strange basement light. I'm typing this on my phone sitting in my driveway, looking up at my own house, absolutely terrified to go inside. If the basement light turns on one more time tonight, I think I'm going to lose my mind. My name is Jason. I bought this place about 6 months ago, a cheap fixer-upper in an older suburb. It smelled like dust and stale tobacco, but it was mine. I live alone, working the second shift at a local distribution center, so I'm usually up late anyway. The house was fine mostly, but I always hated the basement. It was unfinished, just cold concrete floors and exposed beams that always felt damp. I rarely went down there except to change the furnace filter. It had just one naked bulb hanging from a pull cord in the dead center of the room. It started last Tuesday. I came home around 2:30 a.m., totally exhausted. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a faint glow coming from the narrow basement window well near the ground. I knew for a fact I hadn't been down there in days. I went inside, unlocked the door at the top of the basement stairs, and sure enough, the light was blazing down there. I walked down, pulled the cord, turned it off, and wrote it off as an old wiring glitch. 2 nights later, I was watching TV upstairs in the living room. I heard a distinct click come from the kitchen area where the basement door is. It wasn't a subtle noise. It was the sound of a physical switch being thrown. I paused Netflix. The house was dead silent. I walked over to the basement door and saw it, the thin line of yellow light underneath the frame. My stomach dropped. I opened the door and looked down the stairs. The light was on. But this time, I watched the pull cord slowly swinging back and forth in wide arcs, like someone had just let go of it. I didn't go down there. I slammed the door and locked the deadbolt. I slept on the couch with all the living room lights on and a baseball bat next to me that night. You might think I'm overreacting, but if you were there in that silence, seeing that cord swing, you'd understand. The next day, Saturday, I decided I needed to take control. I went to the hardware store and bought one of those smart bulbs that connects to Wi-Fi. My plan was to control it from my phone. If it turned on again, I could turn it off without ever opening that door. I went down there in the broad daylight, armed with a flashlight and my bat. The basement was empty, just shadows and concrete. I swapped the bulb, connected it to the app on my phone, and felt a little better. I even put a piece of duct tape over the pull cord switch so it couldn't be pulled manually. That night around midnight, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. A notification from the smart home app. Basement light, ON. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. I pressed the off button in the app. The little loading wheel spun for a second. Then the app threw an error message in red text. Device offline. I got up and looked at the basement door. The line of light was back. I tried the app again. Device offline. But the light was clearly working. That's when I realized the light wasn't coming from the bulb I installed. It was too bright, too warm. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was anger overtaking fear, but I grabbed the bat, unlocked the door, and crept down the stairs. When I reached the bottom step, I froze. The smart bulb above my head was dark. The duct tape over the switch was still intact. The intense yellow light was coming from the far corner of the basement, behind the furnace, an area that used to just be a blank concrete foundation wall. There was a door there now. It was a small, perfectly square wooden door, maybe 3 feet high, that I swear to God had never existed before yesterday. The light was pouring out from the cracks around it, along with a sound. It was faint, like white noise, just static and whispering. I crept toward it, I had to know. I reached out, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and pulled the small wooden latch. The door creaked open. It wasn't a crawl space behind the door, it was just more basement. It looked like a mirror image of the room I was standing in, but everything was wrong. The concrete was wet and slick with something dark that looked like oil. The furnace in that room looked rusted and warped, like it had been melted by intense heat. And hanging in the center of that reflected room was the original pull-cord bulb. And standing directly under it, facing away from me, was a person. They were wearing the exact same gray hoodie and jeans I had on right now. The figure reached up slowly with a pale hand and grabbed the pull cord. Click. Instantly, the smart bulb in my basement shattered above my head, raining glass down on me. My side of the basement plunged into total darkness, except for the faint gray glow coming from that open square door. The figure in the other room slowly turned around. It didn't have a face, just smooth, pale skin where eyes and a mouth should be. I didn't scream. Adrenaline just took over. I turned and ran blindly in the dark. I stumbled up the stairs, scraping my shins on the concrete steps, hearing that static whispering get louder behind me, like it was flowing out of that tiny door. I slammed the basement door at the top of the stairs, threw the deadbolt, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and bolted out of the house. I'm still sitting in my car. I've been watching the house for an hour. The basement light hasn't come back on. But about 2 minutes ago, the light in my upstairs bedroom just flickered to life, and I live alone.